Auto insurance can all seem the same until it comes time to use it. So don't get stuck paying more for less coverage. Switch to USAA Auto Insurance and you could start saving money in no time. Get a quote today. Restrictions apply.
USAA. Welcome back to the Disney Dish. It is me, Jim Hill, and this is our show for Schmurz Day, April 7th. And yes, I know, this is normally the part of the podcast that Len Testa handles. But Mr. Testa is away this week. He and his beautiful daughter, Hannah, are somewhere out on the briny blue on a boat, I hope. I mean, Len did say he was going on a cruise, but he didn't specify what sort of vessel he and his daughter were traveling on. And I mean, I hope it's a boat of some size that at least has a buffet. Anyway, imagine spending 7 days at sea in a kayak with just a sleeve of saltines, but enough about how Nancy and I spent our 28th anniversary, and I'm sure with time that woman will someday forgive me. And on a completely unrelated topic, my bride and I are already making plans for 2026 to travel with our very good friends, the Browns. We'll be doing one of the Disney cruises to Alaska, where I'm pretty sure it'll be entirely a coincidence when I suddenly find myself stranded on an ice floe with floating out to sea with just a chunk of ambergris to chew on, but fun times. Anyway, Mr. Testa, before he headed out the door in search of the Lido deck, he did make sure that I would not be doing this week's show solo. Len invited a special guest to sit in for him on this week's show. And as someone who grew up in the 1960s, I have to tell you, I am so excited about our special guest co-host this week, folks. And why do I bring up the 1960s? Because I like to think of that era as a time when we as a culture really celebrated cartoonists. I mean, back then, Peanuts was at its absolute height, and Charles Schulz was effectively a rock star. And as a kid, some of the very first books that I purchased with my very own allowance were those collections of the Peanuts comic strips that we've been published every year or so. But around the same time, I also became aware of some of the great political cartoonists who were doing amazing stuff on the editorial pages of the Boston Globe and the Herald American, people like Paul Zepp or Pat Oliphant or Herblock. And as the 60s gave way to the 70s, we saw the rise of alternative newspapers like the Boston Phoenix and the LA Weekly, which is where I then first encountered the work of hugely talented people like Matt Groening, Linda Berry, and the gentleman I'm now so proud to bring on today's show, Herblock Award winner and the creator of the wonderful long-running weekly comic, Tom the Dancing Bug, cartoonist Ruben Bolling.
Oh, well, Jim, thank you so much. It's a thrill and honor to join you here. And listen, I know your listeners are thinking what I'd be thinking if I were listening. Who cares who this guy is, and why isn't he Len Testa? But at least I know there's no chance I'll win them over, so the pressure's off.
Oh, no. I mean, me personally, again, I have been a huge fan of Tom the Dancing Bug, your strip. And by the way, a significant anniversary coming up this year, right? In June, we'll be celebrating the 35th anniversary of the launch of Tom the Dancing Bug. Was it New York Perspectives? Was that the name of the weekly?
Yeah, you've done your research, Jim, as usual. It was New York Perspectives, a small weekly, now defunct newspaper through no fault of my own. I assure you. That's where the very first Tom the Dancing Bug appeared.
Wow. Okay. And you're not wrong about the weekly alternatives. In fact, my favorite, the Phoenix, went under, at least a decade ago, and it kind of kills me. But again, for those of you who have an issue about a cartoonist sitting here in place of Len Testa, to which I have to respond, have you listened to the show before? Just because obviously if you listen to Len, you listen to me, we have the 2025 version of Mutt and Jeff anyway. But more to the point, if you know your Disney history and you know about people like Walt Kelly, who worked on Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, Fantasia and Dumbo before then going off to create his own wonderful comic strip, Pogo, or Hank Ketchum, who after learning to animate over over at Walter Lance's studio, then came over to Disney and worked on Pinocchio and Bambi before then branching off and doing his own single-panel daily strip, Dennis the Menace. And by the way, I'm deliberately bringing up Walt Kelly and Hank Ketchum because these two giants of cartooning have something in common with Ruben Bolling. And all three of these gentlemen have received Rubens, which is the award that only cartoonists can bestow upon their fellow cartoonists for excellence in the field. So, I mean, it must be lovely to be recognized by your peers like that.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a wonderful thing. It was a great honor to be honored that way. It was fantastic.
Cool. All right. So again, you get the idea. Mr. Testa made sure before he headed off on that cruise that his seat will be filled by somebody accomplished. Oh, and did I mention that Ruben is a huge Disney theme park fan? And later on in today's show, we're going to be tapping into Mr. Bolling's expertise when it comes to the visual arts to discuss how the Imagineers use the storytelling skills that filmmakers and game developers use today when they're trying to tell a story with a new ride, show, or attraction. But before we get to that, I got a few housekeeping things I got to do here. Just want to take a second, first of all, to thank everyone who subscribes to this podcast over on Patreon. That includes Derek Alexander, David, Sam Cook, Juliana Duffy, and Kurt Knapman. These folks have been assigned the very sad task of packing up Muppet Vision Theater after it closes at Disney Hollywood Studios on June 7th. My understanding is they've already procured a big enough box to contain the Swedish Chef's cannon, though getting that enough bubble wrap to properly pack the thing is another matter entirely. Other part of this, to be honest, that they are not looking forward to is wading down into that orchestra pit at the Muppet Vision Theater, which after 35 years of continuous performances by an all-penguin orchestra, evidently reeks of herring. And by the way, I just noticed Muppet Vision shuts down on June 7th at the 35 years, and Tom the Dancing Bug will celebrate its 35th anniversary on June 9th, just 2 days later. So I got to ask you, Ruben, how does it feel to effectively have outlived an audio animatronic version of Bean Bunny?
Well, first of all, I got to say that's incredible research because I didn't even know that the anniversary was June 9th. So that is, I knew it was sometime around then. So kudos again to a master historian.
Is that the 35th anniversary? What is that? Paper mache? Is that tinfoil? What is that?
Yeah, I don't know. Okay. With cartooning Bristol board.
There we go. Better.
But you know, when I hear that Muppet Vision has been running for 35 years, I think, well, that's really a long time. And I may not agree, but I can see the argument that why Disney's saying it's time to go. Yeah. Now you're making me realize, wait, that's how long my comic's been going on. I'm just glad I don't have a corporate overlord leading me off to pasture.
There we go.
Or maybe I would I would just replace Aerosmith, which would be cool.
Also a cool idea. And speaking of corporate overlords, they're not overlords; they were sponsors, and I have to acknowledge the lovely people at the DVC rental store. And have you ever dreamed of staying at a deluxe accommodation at Disney for a fraction of the cost? If so, the DVC rental store connects guests with incredible savings on Disney Vacation Club resorts. And whether you're a DVC member looking to rent points or a guest who's looking to stay in style, the DVC rental store offers a seamless process for both. And don't forget, they also provide exciting point swaps for unforgettable experiences like cruises, like the thing Testa's on, and adventures. So please check them out at dvcrentalstore.com/Disney Dish. Okay, so on to this week's news, Ruben. We're going to start on the West Coast this week because what would this year being the 30th anniversary of the original Toy Story arriving in theaters back in November of 1995, the Disneyland Resort has decided to really lean into celebrating that animation studio's creative output. This is why over at Disneyland proper, we're going to see the return of the Pixar Pals Playtime Party. That's entirely too many P's. Inside of the Fantasy Fantasyland Theater, which is sort of a super deluxe meet and greet that would then allow guests the opportunity to get their pictures taken or collect the autographs with characters from some more recent Pixar films like Onward or Luca. Meanwhile, across the plaza in California Adventure, we're going to see the return of Better Together, the Pixar Pal Celebration, which is a parade that typically rolls twice through California Adventure. By the way, Ruben, are you headed out to California this summer at all, or
No plans to go to California. No. Should I go?
Well, it's worth it. This particular parade, the Better Together. What's interesting about it is that, well, first of all, again, the cast members who are in this parade are the performers are all kids in their late teens, early 20s, very energetic bunch,
Nice.
as opposed to old fart like myself. But what's interesting is that when the parade ends, when it literally the last parade unit rolls off stage at California Adventure, the music continues, and then suddenly every single one of the kids who have spent the past half hour dancing and jumping with the parade suddenly surge out from backstage, and they do this wonderful encore number for the folks who, how there's this sub tribe of Disney fans that, as the parade is leaving the park, walks behind the people who are holding the rope, signifying the end of the parade. This is strictly for that bunch who've stuck with them to the very end. They get the special encore number.
That's awesome. What energy.
Well, that's it exactly.
Fantastic.
I would need a nap, a week's worth of naps. But
I
anyway,
need a nap watching it. Yeah.
there we go. And speaking of which, if you're not going to get into the park, this has been recorded a couple of times. This encore number. So head on over to YouTube and type in "Better Together" finale encore or something to that effect. And speaking of something we all really need to see, as part of the 30th anniversary of the original Toy Story arriving in theaters again, November 1995, the Disney parks are about to get a brand new walk-around character that's based on someone from that franchise, which is Rex, the neurotic dinosaur from Andy's bedroom, well, now Bonnie's bedroom. And by the way, I was told from folks who worked on the film that was the original core gag for this Toy Story character that and you have to remember that I want to say the year previous, Jurassic Park had come out into theaters, and of course the T-Rex in that is fearsome and an apex predator, and so the folks who were working on Toy Story thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if there were a Tyrannosaurus who was a nervous Rex? Nervous Rex. Yeah, never mind.
Got it.
All right, got it. Okay. Anyway, this new walk-around version of Rex will debut this summer over on Pixar Pier in that seaside pavilion where the Pixar characters typically do meet and greets. What's interesting about this new character for the Disney parks is because while Rex's body and head and legs are huge, his arms, just like a real T-Rex, are small. They're little human-sized arms in shoulder-length green gloves. So they stick out from the body and actually look very T-Rex-like. They're very character-appropriate. And I want to ask now, Ruben, if you put on your designer hat here, because the Disney parks have typically faced some challenges when it comes to character costumes. And I don't know. Again, you're a Disney park fan, so I'm going to assume at some point you've maybe seen that kinescope of Dateline Disney, the 90-minute long special for the opening of Disneyland, where Walt hadn't had money to do costumes for the park. So he borrowed the outfits from the Ice Capades. And so that's why you got like these really bizarre looking like 2-person costumes for Pluto and Dumbo. Do you ever see those?
I've seen pictures of those. First, you were talking about the walkarounds. I've got to confess, I don't know much about walkarounds and meet and greets. When my kids were little, they all 3 of them were deathly afraid of the characters. I remember being at character meals with them, I think at the Liberty Tree Tavern. and my kids were eating in total fear that one of them would walk over to our table. They could barely eat. So I had to try to make eye contact with the characters. Like I would look into their mouths, which is where their eyes are, and like,
Yep.
make eye and like wave and like say nod no and wave them away so that my kids could enjoy their meal without screaming.
I have a companion story for this experience. Okay, when my daughter Alice was 1 or 2, my ex-wife Michelle, who had a black belt when it came to dealing with guest relations at Disney. I don't even know what the park did that offended her that day, but she went into guest relations and came out accompanied by a plaid. And it was just the notion of, we're going to make this right, miss. And this plaid walks us, and again, now we're at the Magic Kingdom, we're in Florida, actually walks us to, do you know that bridge between the hub next to Cinderella Castle and Liberty Square?
Yes, yeah.
Okay,
it to the left, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of a faux version of the Concord Bridge. But anyway, this plaid walks us to, there's a little alcove there, sits us down, and we're there with it's myself, it's my ex, and our daughter Alice, and her giant Emil Younga stroller. And and we sit there, and it's like, oh, we're going to have this amazing view of the parade in just a moment. And sure enough, as each parade float comes by, because we are literally the only game in town, every character that's walking in the street that's associated with this float comes over and is leaning into the stroller and playing with my daughter. And it's like, first float, she's good. It's like, oh, this is cool. Second float, it's like, oh, there's more of these. And by the third float, she has literally rolled on her side and is facing into the wall like, I'm good. I'm full.
Let's go.
Make the giant mice go away, Daddy.
Right. Well, when they're one, I guess she was just getting it. When my kids were infants, they didn't really care about their characters. They were just colorful things. But starting at 1, 2, 3, 4, it was terrible. But these 1955 costumes that I've seen, they would frighten anybody. They were these are nightmare fuel. And I can't imagine being. I mean, I know there's issues with being in all of them, but oh my God, these look just awful because they're 2-person.
If we jump ahead to 1962, when Disney legend and pioneering Imagineer Bill Justice, Walt turned to him and asked that he design character costumes for the parks. And Bill hit upon this conceit of, okay, what we'll do are giant heads that really sort of do look like the characters. But the problem is, of course, that to do this, and again, you got to remember this is 1960s, so these things are made out of rebar and fiberglass. So they weigh like 50 pounds.
Oh, boy.
And the cast member that's inside is effectively holding it on their head. So the little hands of the characters just dangle dead off of the side. And, and it's just, and again, these are also kind of disturbing to look at as well.
They are, but I think they're a little more appealing. They may have been harder to be inside, but they look sort of appealing. And I guess whoever is inside the Rex costume will, if I understood you right, will have arms that are just as useless.
Well, no, actually what's interesting is, again, he's going to be, again, wearing shoulder-length green gloves, so he can in fact, Rex will be able to...
Shoulder-length, oh, okay, I see.
He'll be able to sign autographs. He'll be able to shake hands.
Wow.
On the other hand, if we jump now ahead to, if you've seen the Maui walk-around character, or for that matter, Wreck-It Ralph, where they have these giant beefy arms that, because they are so bulky and so heavy, again, same thing, they're dangling because nobody could possibly lift these up or manipulate them to sign an autograph. So it's and more to the point, the poor cast member that's inside has to be so careful, because if you're Maui, or if you're Wreck-It Ralph and you turn quickly, you can send a child sprawling.
Yes, of course.
But anyway, just to circle back, obviously, if you're running interference for your kids at character dining, that said, from a design point of view, do you have a favorite character costume for the park, or?
Ooh, you picked a tough theme park topic for me, Jim, because of my family history. But I will say, what comes to mind is the closest I've come to interacting with a walk-around character are the couple of times I met up with Len in the parks. Disney should set up a meet and greet with Len Testa. And
I would pay money for that.
anyone would.
I like that.
The line would be longer than Mickey Mouse's. And not just because Len is adored and so much fun, but he'd spend so much time in each interaction, like telling people detailed things of what to do next, and then running off to buy them a churro, and each interaction would go on forever.
I can see you have actually spent time with Mr. Testa. Okay,
yes, it's a delight.
There we go. And now, if speaking of the characters in the park and folks who work here with the podcast, I do want to bring up Jim Schul. He's Len and my partner over on Disney Unpacked, the show we do for Patreon. And he tells this wonderful story about how in the 1980s, Mr. Schul was given the opportunity to go out on stage at Disneyland dressed as Brer Bear from Song of the South.
Right.
Evidently, this was some sort of Disney executive training opportunity with the idea that you give the people in the corner offices the opportunity to see what it's like to be a frontline employee, at the park. So, and again, as Mr. Schul likes to tell the story, this Brer Bear outfit he's in, it's one of the ones that Bill Justice designed. So the head portion towers over. I mean, it's resting on his shoulders, but the actual head is miles overhead, and more to the point, it weighs a ton. Right. And again, because it's made out of fiberglass and rebar, it's also a closed system. So it means that as the sweat starts to come off of Mr. Schul, and to hear Jim talk, he started sweating profusely the moment this ginormous heavy head was lowered onto his shoulders.
He has his own splash mountain in there.
Well, no, that's it exactly. These bodily fluids begin to rain down on him. And the other thing is that when and in fact, I love that you talked earlier knowledgeably about, when you're trying to get these people attention, you have to talk into their neck. Right. And that's the thing. Jim is looking out through this tiny hole in Brer Bear's neck, which is small to begin with. But again, when sweat is now raining down and getting in your eyes, it's now impossible to see. And now small children are shoving autograph books in your hand. And I want to stress here, Jim didn't wear this Brer Bear outfit performing in a stage show. He didn't march in a parade. He just had to stand in a corner of Critter Country for a half hour. And by the way, evidently that's the way it works. That you have a half hour on stage, a half hour off stage, where you then attempt to consume your entire body weight in Powerade. But all he had to do was stand there, post some pictures and sign autographs. But to hear Schul talk, it was the longest half hour of his adult life.
That's rough.
Oh, and speaking of Mr. Schul talk, I want to remind folks that if you can hear more of these sorts of stories over on YouTube as part of Disney Journey with Jim Schul, which is something of a solo project for Mr. Schul, something different than what me, and Len do over on Disney Unpacked. And speaking of doing different, when we get back, we're going to talk about what was different about Buzz Lightyear's costume for the parks. But first, this.
Marvel Studios' Thunderbolts will take the world by storm.
Yeah! The world has never faced a threat this big. And you're gonna help me stop it.
Us?
Why, you got someplace to be?
On May 2nd.
Avengers are gone. No one's coming to save the day.
Their time.
I think we could be the people that are coming.
Has come.
Being a hero, there is no higher calling.
Let's do this.
Marvel Studios' Thunderbolts. Only in theaters May 2nd. This film is not yet rated.
Uh-oh. The last cookie.
You can get a new box of cookies in as fast as an hour with Walmart Express Delivery.
Are you my guilty self-conscience?
No, I'm the voice offering you promo code EXPRESS for free delivery on your first order.
Hey, who ate my cookies?
You mean, these cookies?
Order now. Welcome to your Walmart. Promotion valid for first express delivery order. $50 minimum subject to availability. Restrictions apply.
It's time for basketball, and Uber Eats is dropping deals on game day favorites to keep you locked in on the action. Like when you're craving a buzzer beater, but also buffalo wings. Or when an upset makes you want to ugly cry into a pizza. And right now, Uber Eats has game day deals from McDonald's, Popeyes, Pizza Hut, Wendy's, and hundreds more local favorites. So you can keep your eyes on the ball and your hands on a hamburger. Order now, only on Uber Eats. Product availability varies by region. See app for details.
And we're back. Okay, I am here with Ruben Bolling, who is sitting in for Len Testa, and we were just talking about the weight and the heft of those character costumes that cast members have to wear when they're out in the Disney parks. And one of the toughest outfits to wear in the park was reportedly the very first version of the Buzz Lightyear character costume, which actually debuted in the park in November of 1995, just as the first Toy Story movie arrived in theaters. Now, Ruben, did you actually get to see the Toy Story parade at MGM Studios?
I didn't have the pleasure.
Okay.
Yeah, that was before I had kids.
Well, there we go.
So my hadn't dived back into being a theme park fan.
That's what's so fascinating. You actually you just backed up the original Disney formula. I mean, I remember talking with execs there. What they talked about. Well, what's interesting about Disney fandom is that we have them when we're kids. In fact, we got them right up to 11, 12. And then they go away. But we get them back when they have kids, and we then have them effectively from their late 30s onward, because then they're the support system for the wallet that gets the kids down there.
Onward is right. I dove back into it hard once I had kids, and then I got more and more as my life went on and my kids grew up, and they aged out of it.
Well, there we go. But again, they hang in there. They're grandchildren. All right. Anyway, to get back to the Toy Story parade, what was fascinating about the Toy Story parade is it actually debuted at MGM on the exact same day that the very first Toy Story movie debuted in theaters, which was November 22nd, 1995. And a side note here, folks, because Ruben and I are contemporaries. When you're our age and somebody says November 22nd, the opening of Toy Story in theaters isn't the first thing to come to mind, now is it?
If you're thinking of the JFK assassination, I was a baby in a crib. So I don't have if you ask me where I was when that happened, I'll say I was in a crib.
There we go. Okay.
That's my alibi.
Okay. Okay. Good. Somebody let Oliver Stone know. Okay. All right. Anyway, but when you're my age, 66, I mean, what's weird is I will go to write a Toy Story story, and face it, with Toy Story 5 coming out next summer. And in fact, on July 19th, 2026, circle it on the calendar, folks. Have to write about this film yet again, and it's just always in my mind. That's the day Toy Story opened, and JFK got shot in Dallas. But anyway, again, I was dropped as a child. It explains a lot of things. Okay, moving on now. But back in 1995, on November 22nd, I was able to do something I have never ever been able to do since, Ruben. I caught the very first matinee of Toy Story over at the AMC Pleasure Island at Walt Disney World. Again, my ex and I were living down in Florida at the time. I want to say it started at 11:30 that morning. And then after we saw the movie, we were able to climb in our car, drive straight over to Disney MGM, where we caught the inaugural presentation of this Toy Story parade. And I want to say it went out into the park 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock. No, it had to be 3 o'clock, because that's the joke, right? What do dumb tourists ask Disney cast members all the time? When is the 3 o'clock parade start? But anyway, it was very cool to have gone from hearing Randy Newman's score inside of that movie theater to suddenly have the same music blaring on Hollywood Boulevard. But anyway, we were talking about the first iteration of the Buzz Lightyear character costume, which again made its debut, Disney theme park, part of the Toy Story parade back in November of 95. And this thing, Ruben, because it was supposed to look like the hard plastic action figure that we know from the Pixar movie, reportedly weighed a ton. I mean, it's 70 pounds
Oh,
plus.
geez, yeah.
Okay, now picture this. You're the cast member who has to wear this outfit. And again, they literally size you. Just sort of like, oh, you're 5'6". You can go, you could be Mickey. No, excuse me, 5'4". Oh, you're Mickey. On the other hand, I had a friend who auditioned for Goofy who was told he was a quarter of an inch too short.
Oh, yeah. They got to fit the costumes.
But here's the thing. He went home, and for the very next audition, he came in wearing 5 sets of white gym socks. And they measured him, and at that point,
that's the old kids trick for being tall enough to get on to be above the line to get onto a roller coaster.
There we go.
So you would think Disney would be wise to that.
Yeah, no. He got to play Goofy, and that's all he wanted to do. But anyway, the people who were wearing this outfit began to experience muscle strain, back aches. And it got so bad, and because there was such a small group of people who could actually fit in this outfit, that Disney, the zoo crew, or the executives in charge of the zoo crew, that's what they call the people who wear these walk-around outfits in the park, or at least they did back in the day. Anyway, they did something they'd never done before, Ruben. They actually started to pay for these folks to go to the chiropractor and to get massages on their day off. And obviously this was because Toy Story had become such a hit in the latter part of 1995, and consequently there was huge demand in the park to see Buzz Lightyear. And again, because so few people could fit in the outfit or stand up wearing 70 pounds worth of stuff. I by the way, I bring this up because just 2 years after this, The Lion King opens on Broadway at the New Amsterdam Theater in 1997. And what was interesting is the very same stories. So stories began to circulate about how the elaborate costumes that Julie Taymor created for that Tony Award-winning show were so heavy that they were causing the performers to have back issues. And now, Ruben, have you seen Lion King on stage? Or?
I did not, and it was playing for decades, only a couple of miles away from my house. So
it's
from my
still
home,
playing.
So it is okay.
On behalf of Disney Theatrical,
it's not too late. But it seems as though those costumes, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems as though they weren't designed to totally hide the performer the way a Buzz Lightyear was. So it seemed as though just from like the commercials I saw that it was easier on the actors.
Well, I guess the difference was that, face it, Buzz isn't dancing 8 shows a week.
Oh yeah, well that's it.
That's just standing there smiling and signing autographs and trying not to sweat. But again, same thing happened. In order to help the cast deal with these costume-related issues, Disney Theatrical starts paying those who are complaining about back pain or muscle strain. All right, we'll send you the chiropractor. We'll send you the massages.
Meanwhile, what that means is that they have to spend their day off getting massages at the chiropractor. So the Disney's paying for it, but that means they've got to get that done on their own time.
Well, but the more interesting bend on this story is that Disney was looking at how much are we spending? And it's like, how much is it going to cost to revisit these costumes and make them out of lighter weight material?
Yeah.
And that's what ultimately happened in both cases, by the way. Sometime between November of 1995, which again, first Toy Story out in theaters, and then November of 99, that's when Toy Story 2 showed up in theaters. The walk-around character costume for Buzz Lightyear was completely redesigned and then now constructed of far lighter plastic, which meant Buzz still looked great.
Space-age polymers.
There we go. Suddenly, what was the Dustin Hoffman Anne Bancroft movie?
The Graduate.
The Graduate. Suddenly I'm thinking, plastics. There we go. All right. Anyway, mind you, year before Toy Story 2 opens in theaters, specifically, we're talking November of 1998, we saw Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger Spin opened at the Magic Kingdom. And during season 1 of Disney Impact, we actually talked about this interactive shooter. And now you're familiar with this attraction at the parks. Ruben, how do you do on Space Ranger Spin? Because I have no hand-eye coordination. I always get a laughable score.
I always do worse than my kids. I was always beaten by my kids. So if that tells you, I just sort of shoot chaotically is the way I would describe my strategy.
Well, and Mr. Testa always reminds me that there is some super deluxe target in this thing that's like 1 billion points. And it's like, you don't have to shoot anything. You just have to shoot that. But I can never find it.
That would be good to know.
Anyway, I bring up Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger Spin because this Tomorrowland favorite will be closing later this summer for an upgrade. And as it's been explained to me, a Villain Con, when Minion Blast, when that opened at Universal Studios in August of 2023, suddenly the original Space Ranger Spin looked kind of creaky and old-fashioned. And by the way, Ruben and I were pre-gaming, and you brought up that you and your family just last month got to experience Villain Con. Is that right?
I did. I wasn't with my family. I was with a buddy, but I did experience it, and it is really good. One nice innovation is that your laser has its own color, so you can see exactly where your gun is aiming. So it's a little bit less chaotic. You can see what you're doing, and I guess you can't call them. We shouldn't call them guns. Can we call them blasters?
Something to that effect. Yeah. But by the way, the very thing you just mentioned is a feature of the upcoming upgrade of Space Ranger. So the notion of, you're going to have a handheld rather than something that's anchored to your ride vehicle, and each individual ray gun or whatever they call them will have its own individual colors. So same thing, you'll be able to tell.
It's a nice innovation. It made it a lot easier to follow what you're doing. The Villain Minion Blast ride, I thought, was really cool, and I really liked the queue. The idea is that you're at a villains convention, and I've been to enough comics conventions, Comic Cons and comic conventions, to appreciate the jokes on conventions. There's so many jokes.
By the way, if you enjoyed that, you actually have Jim Schul to thank. He worked on that Villain Con after he left Imagineering, 30 plus years with the company. And in fact, very proudly, when we were going through the ride a year or so ago, he pointed out he had done the Comic-Con-esque map for the attraction. So
great. It is so great. Pitch perfect. Everything. This is great. All the booths, the map, the breakout rooms. I remember there was one. There was a booth for a travel agency for villains, and there was one. The company called Lair B&B, where villains can rent out an underground lair. It was really fun.
All right, got to go back and pay attention. But all right, now we bring this up because Tokyo Disney Land has its own version of this ride. However, it's not Space Ranger Spin. It's called Buzz Lightyear Astro Blaster. It shut down in October of last year, and it's going to be rethemed to be a Wreck-It Ralph ride-through shooter, which will supposedly open spring of 2026. Now, where this gets interesting is that a lot of the tech that was created for Tokyo's redo of its Buzz Lightyear ride-through shooter is now reportedly being folded into the redo of the Florida version of Buzz. So what's kind of cool about that is when because the revamped version of the Magic Kingdom Space Ranger Spin will come online months before the Tokyo Wreck-It Ralph ride does, again, sometime spring 2026. Supposedly this will temporarily give stateside theme park fans bragging rights. We get the cool stuff. And then, of course, that's until the Wreck-It Ralph ride opens up 2026. And then it puts every ride-through shooter at a Disney park around the globe to shame because, say it with me now, folks, Tokyo gets the best stuff. All right. Now, toward that end, for example, they have that park's version of the Main Street Electrical Parade, Dreamlights, which debuted in the park in 2001 and has been updated numerous times. In fact, more recently between 2017 2020. And I don't know if you've ever seen any of the imagery from this, Ruben, but these are amazing floats, which kind of brings us to Disney Starlight, Dream the Night Away, the new nighttime parade, which will be debuting at the Magic Kingdom this summer. First parade for Florida that brings some of the new IP, Encanto, Moana, Coco, into the Magic Kingdom. Now, Disneyland did something similar with their version of their Main Street Electrical Parade. They took the last float you'd typically say in the Main Street. Have you ever seen this thing? It's called To Honor America, and it's basically a very long, waving red, white, and blue flag.
I have not.
Okay. Well, what they did out there is they took this thing and it's like, well, it's wavy. Hills. It could be hills. And they changed all the lights to green and blue. And now they've used this rolling hill, rolling wave, whatever it is. They used this as a way to bring the newer Disney characters from Disney films like Raya and the Last Dragon and Frozen and Brave into the park. But again, you just need you to put on your designer hat here. The way they did it is all of these characters are now done in the style of the Small World dolls. Any thoughts? I mean, have you, speaking of which, have you seen California's version of Small World that has effectively folded in stylized version of the Disney characters?
I think I saw that last time I was there. I definitely have seen pictures of it. It's kind of nice that they they bring these characters into that world. I think it's a nice idea, and they do it well.
I agree. And speaking of things that some of the parks do well, I don't know if you've managed to see the videos out there for the Disney Electric Sky Parade, debuted at Disneyland Paris in January of 2024. But effectively, it's the Main Street Electrical Parade with that 1970s Moog music performed in the sky over that park's castle.
Yes.
And what was interesting is over the year that it ran, in fact, it finished its run of the park in January of this year, but they updated it several times. They changed it to reflect, Halloween and Christmas. And speaking of Disney and drone shows, did you last summer managed to get to see in person the Disney Dreams That Soar thing that was done at Disney Springs?
I did. I saw the one with 800 drones last June. That must have been it. I don't never remember the full Disneyfied names of these, but I did see it last June when I was invited down by Disney for the Tiana's Bayou Adventure press event.
How very cool.
I write about theme parks, among other subjects, for one of my comic strips clients, Boing Boing. And I loved it. I'd seen video, but that doesn't capture how spectacular it is to see these drone shows in person. I feel like the brain fills in the space between the lights, so that you sort of perceive the objects as solid, and they just look like these huge objects floating, especially when you see them against the other side of the lake, the structures on the other side of the lake, they look like tremendous objects floating in the sky. It really is really cool.
Well, all right. I'm so glad to hear that because, of course, Universal debuted its own. Well, it's got fireworks, it's got projection, it's got music, its own show, Sensational, last summer, and just, I forgive me for the adult term, folks here, but dick waving. Disney had 800 drones, and Universal had a mere 600. Oh my God! Right? Why would I even want to go to a show that only had 600 drones? But what's interesting right now, Ruben, is all drone shows in Orlando are on pause right now. And did you hear about this incident back in December at Lake Eola?
I did not.
Okay.
I don't like the sound of that.
Well, Sky Elements, which is this company that does these sorts of drone-based presentations, they were doing a Christmas show over Lake Eola. And again, that's a Lake Eola park in the center of downtown Orlando. It was a show involving 500 drones, and one drone strayed from its flight path and evidently intersected with a couple of other drones, which compromised it. And then it fell back to Earth. But the problem is, it en route to the ground, it hit a 7-year-old child. It hit him in the face and in the chest.
Wow.
And the poor kid, Alexander, had to be rushed to Arnold Palmer Hospital, by the way, where my daughter was born 31 years ago. They have terrific doctors there. But the poor kid had to have heart surgery.
Heart surgery. Wow.
Yeah. But on the other hand, made a recovery, was discharged on the December 31st, and right now, evidently, the FAA is launching an investigation, or is well into an investigation, and as a direct result, sort of like, we're going to put pause on all of these drone shows here in Central Florida until we find out why this happened, because this shouldn't have happened. And
Sure.
And this is disappointing news for Disney World fans, because David Duffy, who was the vice president of entertainment at Disneyland Paris Resort, he was there for years, he transferred to Walt Disney World in August of 2023. And supposedly he was the guy who got Dreams, the Disney Dreams That Soar, the show that you saw and so enjoyed last summer. He's the guy who got that up and running in Florida, because the notion was, we actually want to do something like the Main Street Sky Parade in a Florida park, in a place where guests are looking up at this going on over a castle.
Yes.
But this was you got to walk before you can run. So we're doing this with 800 drones out over Lake Buena Vista.
Yeah, sure. For safety, sure.
Yeah, but anyway, on the heels of that incident, again, up in the sky over Lake Eola, you got to wonder what David Duffy is going to do in the interim to dazzle Walt Disney World visitors. And Ruben, as a visual storyteller, what do you think about what Disney's done over like the past decades with shows like Wishes that use the sky as a stage, or for that matter, all of the shows that are done for the parks now using projection mapping?
I think I'm a huge fan of these drone shows and projection mapping, and I think the technology will only get better, especially with drones. And I'm one of the few people who aren't crazy about fireworks for environmental reasons, and pets hate them. So I was kind of hopeful that these could maybe replace them someday. But wow, they've got to work out the safety issues. That is a horrible story about that boy who was hit. And that can't happen, obviously. And it's got to be 0% chance.
And you're not wrong. Now, speaking of visual storytelling, when we get back from this break, Ruben's going to help me break down how the Imagineers set the stage for what is arguably Animal Kingdom's very best tour ride, which is Expedition Everest. But first, this.
Lowe's knows member-only doorbuster deals make SpringFest savings even better. Right now, rewards members can get 3 19.3-ounce Bonnie Plants vegetables and herbs for just $10. Plus, save $50 on a Charbroil Performance Series 4-burner grill, now $149. Lowe's, we help, you save. Valid through 4/7, excludes Alaska and Hawaii. Selection varies by location, subject to change while supplies last. Program subject to terms and conditions. Details at lowes.com/terms.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
Wow, this house is cute. But can I really get in the game in this economy? I do have savings, and I am responsible-ish. I should bury it. I'm being wild. But what if I'm not being wild, though? Could I actually score a...
Kick off your home buying journey with Zillow's new buyability tool. It makes it easy to find out what you can afford, so you can get off the bench and onto the playing field with confidence. Check your buyability only on Zillow.
And we're back. Okay, again, it's me, Jim Hill, and Ruben Bolling, and in for the vacationing Len Testa somewhere at sea. And since this week's episode goes live on Schmurz Day, April 7th, and that's the 19th anniversary of the opening of Expedition Everest, Legend of the Forbidden Mountain, which, again, as I stated before the break, arguably the best thrill ride at a Disney Animal Kingdom. But
arguably, actually, I think Flight of Passage would have something to say about that. I love Expedition Everest. That's my, I love it. But Flight of Passage is my favorite ride. Full stop. I rode it on that last trip I was talking about for a few weeks ago, and I have to admit, I shed a tear. It was so beautiful. It's just a wonderful ride.
I'm not going to dispute it. It's a wonderful ride, and it has some amazing emotional beats and storytelling. But it's interesting you bring up that attraction again on the other side of this theme park, because the Imagineers deliberately built Flight of Passage on top of Navi River Journey with the idea that this supersized show building would, well, first of all, it has a lot of height, it has a lot of mass, but it also makes it that much easier to stage and sell the bulk of Pandora's floating mountains, which again, I would argue is for me is the place making that they do in Pandora is just stunning. Walk in there and you feel like you're off the planet. But
100%.
You know, and again, we all know about floating mountains because we saw the original Avatar movie, arrived in theaters December 2009, went on to sell $3.5 billion worth of tickets. Second highest grossing film in Hollywood history. Only Gone with the Wind, which, by the way, back when people, here's my nickel, let me in. But that made more money.
Inflation adjusted.
There we go. All right. Now, what the Imagineers learned the hard way when they put Flight of Passage on top of Navi River Journey is that when you build one attraction on top of another one, and one of those attractions, and I'm not naming names, a Flight of Passage, accidentally sets off fire alarms repeatedly because those flying motorcycle seats you sit in sometimes overheat. What happens, Ruben, is the alarm goes off. You have to dump both rides. You have to dump the entire show building because an alarm has gone off in one attraction. And when you think about all the people who could be standing in the queue downstairs for Navi River Adventure and the thousands of people who are both in the exterior queue on the mountainside of Pandora and then the people who were inside the research facility, that's 5,000 people.
5,000 black belts and guest relations.
There we go. There we go. Oh, yeah, that's a lot of people standing on the bridge at the Magic Kingdom.
Yes.
Okay, let's get back now to Expedition Everest, Legend of the Forbidden Mountain. And again, I just quick side note, am I the only person on the planet who uses the full name? Is anyone else out there using Legend of the Forbidden Mountain still? Or is
Don't look at me.
Okay.
I barely call it Expedition Everest.
There we go. My old editor, the Devon Dispatch, Phil Morris, drilled into my head the full name. Use the full name. So
you are a stickler. I've always noticed that.
There we go. Okay, so anyway, we were talking previously about your reward-winning weekly comic strip as we were pre-gaming, and I have to admit, I actually told Ruben this. I was fascinated because Tom the Dancing Bug, and again, that's the name of Ruben's strip. You can check it out, folks. Good stuff. You change the look of the strip every week, but when it comes to the basic structure of how you tell stories, it's kind of consistent. You typically use 9 panels. Is that right?
I'll use 9 panels. I'll use 12, 15, 1. I do all different kinds of formats. I'll come up with the visual or the format along with the story. So I'll think of some narrative trope that I think is funny, like that's used in movies and books, and then I'll think this is a good use of my character Billy Dare, who is a Tintin-like character. So, then I'll structure it around that character and that look, and that then that will lead to jokes and other things from there. So I think of a joke or a comic idea, but it's not complete until I know what kind of comic I want to draw it as, or what kind of format I want to use. Realistic superhero style, or Hanna-Barbera style, or something that I make up. It's all different every week.
Well, that's what I love about Tom the Dancing Bug. I mean,
thanks.
it's one of those things where, you know how you'll watch a comic strip over years and watch how an artist perfects their style, and sometimes the characters get sharper or sometimes they get looser, and it's just the thing with Tom the Dancing Bug is you use so many different styles, but you're so skilled, so good, and so as you just mentioned, aping the classic superhero style, or leaning into Tintin or that sort of thing. And for me, that almost seems harder to do.
It is, especially when I'm trying to ape the style of masters, the greats. So I fail, and then you can still see me through it. I try not to, but yeah, that's what keeps it so much fun for me, because I love those. And when I draw as myself, whatever that is, I'm not even sure. I've done, so I'm like an impressionist who doesn't even know what his own style is. It's boring. I'll have the best time when I'm doing like something on Calvin and Hobbes. I'm in for a great day of drawing, of so much fun, of really diving into that world and trying to draw like that.
Waterston did some wonderful stuff, and by the way, you quote his stuff beautifully. But anyway, getting back to the Imagineers now, especially that first generation of Imagineers who came over to work on Walt's Family Fun Park in Anaheim. Well, a lot of them came over from feature animation, though it's worth noting here that a number of the folks actually came out of the world of production design at 20th Century Fox and Warner's, but they used the language of film. They used establishing shots, close-ups, medium shots. So everywhere you look in the park, you see top quality visual storytelling. And do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. It's amazing. I mean, I think I come to this really from a perspective of as a parodist, as a satirical cartoonist. I think of authenticity, and I got to say this word on a podcast. I don't even say it in real life. Verisimilitude.
Okay.
So, I said I do a lot of parodies in Tom the Dancing Bug, and what I know is that it's, even though I don't always get it, it's important to get the look of what I'm parodying exactly right. And I always think of the argument that the Monty Python guys had when they were making Monty Python and the Holy Grail. Terry Jones and Terry Gilliam, the directors, were waiting for the fog to be just right to shoot a scene. And John Cleese would get impatient and say, "The fog isn't funny." I think he was wrong. I think getting the cinematography right gave the movie verisimilitude, and it made it funnier. And Mel Brooks went to great lengths to make Young Frankenstein look exactly like an old Frankenstein movie.
I love that you brought that up, because it's interesting, sort of a carry on from what you were just saying about fog isn't funny. Isn't the story that Brooks was supposed to make Young Frankenstein at Warner Brothers, but the deal breaker was Warner Brothers wouldn't let him make it in black and white, and Mel's like, "This has got to be."
That's it exactly.
Yeah, it's got to be in black and white.
Yes, it's got. He knew it has to look like it in order to parody it correctly, and that's why I work so hard to get the look of Calvin's face right when I'm drawing him. And they went to the extent of finding the original laboratory props from the original Frankenstein movie.
That's right.
In someone's garage, and used those actual props. And that, I would argue, that made the movie funnier. And it may seem I'm off on a tangent, but I think that's what Expedition Everest gets, especially in the queue. I think modern cues are so important because they set the tone and the story elements, and they slowly bring you into the world of the ride. That said, I should admit that the last time I rode this with my buddy, when I was there a few weeks ago, I went on the single rider line and skipped the queue. Because when I'm in the parks, I'm all about efficiency and speed.
No. Well, that's the curse of hanging out with Mr. Testa.
That's right. Yeah, we're on the same page. But the queue, I remember the queue goes through this decrepit, cheap office of a Tibetan expedition company, and you're in the story that you're signing up for an expedition, and everything is so detailed and authentic. The signs, the old computer, it just rings of truth. And then you wind through a trek shop and an outfit to outfit yourself. Yeah.
No. You're not the word you used previously about authenticity. I mean, it does. It puts you in that world.
And I think it's subtle, but it makes the ride that much more thrilling and fun. And I think I give credit to, you can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm a fake theme park expert, but Joe Rohde, because that's how he designed all of Animal Kingdom. He and his team did research and made everything, an African village, an Asian bus, look so authentic, because they didn't just do a cursory job based on impressions from 1950s movies. They went there and saw it and made reality, and it really sells the whole experience and makes it so much better.
Well, toward that end, that brings us to our next question, because we are in a transition moment at this theme park. If you think about, for example, just in the past week or so, we had It's Tough to Be a Bug close. And we're about to get a new Zootopia movie experience, 3D, whatever, in that same space. A Zootopia Better Zoogather. Likewise, we had, again, I guess you have to be a certain age. I mean, what was it? Dino Land USA, the roadside attraction with the cheap, terrible attractions and the games and that sort of thing. And it reminds me of that great story about Frank Oz, when there's a script that Jim Henson wrote for the Muppets called The Cheapest Muppet Movie Ever Made. Have you ever heard of this project? And
no.
It has a wonderful conceit. It starts off with the most spectacular credit sequence you've ever seen in a movie in your entire life. Explosions, credits flying at you, and then the credit scene ends, and you're in a screening room with Gonzo and Kermit, and Kermit's like, wow, that's amazing. What about the rest of the movie? It's like, yeah, well, about that. I spent all the money on the credits. And then it becomes a movie that they shoot guerrilla style around Hollywood because they have no money.
Oh, that's fantastic.
At one point, they're so out of money, it's just storyboards at this point. I mean, it's just, we don't even have money for a VHS camera. Now it's just drawings. But I bring that up because, God, this was like 10 or 15 years ago after Disney finally got a hold of the Muppets. And Frank was willing to come back and direct a Muppet movie because he sort of stepped away from the Muppets at the time, but he wanted to do the project that Jim had always wanted to do, that Jim thought was a funny idea. And so Frank came to Disney and said, all right, well, here's the thing, and we'll be shooting guerrilla style, and we'll have to be on location a lot. So it's going to cost $30 million to make this movie. And Disney was like, what?
$30 million to make a cheap movie.
And ultimately, it's the old Dolly Parton joke. Frank literally turned to Disney executives, do you understand how expensive it is to look this cheap?
Right.
And that was the thing. It was just sort of like, to get the details right, to spend the money, to spend the time. That's expensive. And the weird part of it was, a lot of people would look at Dino Land USA and, oh, this is cheap off-the-shelf carnival rides. It's like, yes, that's what they are. When you find one of these places by the side of the road, that's what they bought.
It was very authentic. It looked just like it. They even had the old parking, the white lines that had faded out because it was supposedly. I think I learned this from you. I'm telling this back to you because it was supposedly used to be a parking lot.
That's it exactly.
Yeah,
in fact, that I remember talking with the gentleman whose literally what his job was to make the pavement look old and cracked. and it was like, I'm out there on my hands and knees with a spade trying to make authentic Arizona in 90-degree heat cracking. But anyway, to sort of pivot back to Expedition Everest here, I have to ask, because face it, it's been a while since the Yeti has not been in B mode. And how do we feel about this?
Well, actually, I remember you at one point saying to Len on this podcast that, it can't be considered or maybe I'm putting words in your mouth, but something to the effect of it can't be considered a classic or great ride because the main feature of it that when the Yeti swipes at you, his that heavy arm swipes at you as you go by, hasn't worked for like 95% of the ride's life, and I can see that. I just wrote it. I think that the strobe effect is actually effective. I've forgiven Expedition. I think it's. I think the B mode is this is the mode. This is it. It's now A mode. It still works. I forgive it a lot more than when I go on Rise of the Resistance and there are certain B modes that are in effect, or I went on Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway and something wasn't working. I feel like Expedition Everest just works. Everyone comes off that so happy.
No, it's a great coaster. No lie. And I mean, it's a great coaster. But interesting that you bring up that they haven't fixed it, because I just in the past week was talking with somebody in Glendale, and they were talking about. It's like, look, let's talk about Disney's Animal Kingdom. We're going to get Zootopia, Better Zoogether show. So that, and that's going to make the old theater under the Tree of Life popular again. And then 2027, 2026, we're going to get the Encanto new ride. And that's phase 1 of Tropical America.
That's
and then
soon. Good.
2028, Indy, the redo of Dinosaur. And so you'll effectively have 3 new ride experiences. And let's be honest, 2 of them are redos, but you get a new ride there in that park. And evidently what they're talking about, once those 3 are all online and there are new things to send people to, Expedition Everest will go down for 6 months. And but here's the thing.
They're going to fix it?
Well, that's not enough time to fix the Yeti. But what it is enough time to do is I don't know if you're familiar with for Disneyland's 60th, they went back into the Matterhorn and they redid the Yetis that they had in that thing previously from 78. They weren't animatronics. They were effectively animated props. I mean, I raise an arm.
Right.
That's all I do. They went in and put in new animatronic Yetis. They put in projection effects, and that's supposedly what they're talking. I mean, it literally is a quick fix because they feel like the longest they can keep that thing down is 6 months.
Yeah,
because that park it so needs ride shows and attractions. But it's like,
yes, it always has.
But again, on the other side of whatever, once Indy Dinosaur gets turned into Indy. But again, I just want to stress to folks that yes, that there is something coming, but it's going to be low budget and it's going to be fast. So I don't know. Maybe they'll go to the Yeti that's hanging there now. The 25-foot tall, 20,000 pound figure, and I don't know, maybe they'll fluff his fur, they'll give him a nice curl. I don't know, but
a perm.
But perm, there we go. All right, but anyway, on that somewhat discouraging note, we come to the end of this week's edition of Disney Dish, and I just want to thank you, Ruben, for filling in for Len Testa. You've been a delight. And where can the nice folks, if they want to learn more about your Herb Block winning strip, where can they find you?
Well, I named the strip is Tom the Dancing Bug. You can find me at tomthedancingbug.com. I don't know if you can hear my dog Otis barking in the background. He hates promos, but I'll press on and say that you can join the Tom the Dancing Bug Patreon called the Inner Hive at tomthedancingbug.com. And Jim, this was a really thrill. I love this podcast. You guys are fantastic. You guys got me through the pandemic in a very meaningful way, and I just love you guys. Thanks so much for having me on.
Not a problem. Again, Mr. Testa recommended you, and again, highly recommended. By the way, Otis has great instincts, which will I apologize for the plug I'm about to do. Speaking of Patreon, you can help support this podcast by subscribing over on patreon.com at Jim Hill Media, where we're posting exclusive content. Our latest video with Imaginary Jim Schul discusses the different iterations of Snow White's Scary Adventure. These days, folks, it's like if you go to KFC. Do you want your chicken original or crispy, or do you want your Snow White Adventure scary or enchanted?
A little spicy. A little spicy.
A little spicy. There we go. On next week's show, Mr. Test and I will return to California, where we will discuss how Disneyland's Alice in Wonderland dark ride was once supposed to be this wild walkthrough. Honestly, the ultimate funhouse. Anyway, you will find more of me over at jimhillmedia.com and more Mr. Testa over at Len at touringplans.com. And we are produced spectacularly by Eric Hersey and David Gray, who will be demonstrating their skills in dissecting owl pellets at the Vermont Institute of Natural Science, which on Saturday, April 26th, will be staging its annual Owl Festival. And while Eric and David are doing that, please go to iTunes and rate our show and tell us what you'd like to hear next. So for Ruben and Len, this is Jim, and we will see you on the next show.